What drives a man to leap from a burning plane into a storm of bullets below? Paratrooper films capture that moment between heaven and hell when courage becomes survival and fear becomes history. Many of these stories were not fiction. They were lived, they were censored, they were buried in archives and forgotten. Tonight we drop into 15 paratrooper movies that actually happened, plus 3 myths that refused to die. Number 15. The Longest Day, 1962. The Longest Day was not just a film, it was a reconstruction of chaos. It arrived like a history lesson shot through the smoke of memory. A massive hit on release, it pulled together Allied and German perspectives into one colossal cinematic drop zone. The film chronicled the D-Day invasion and the paratroopers who fell behind enemy lines in the black hours before dawn. This was not simply storytelling, it was testimony. Veterans who had been there stood beside actors like Richard Todd, who had himself parachuted into Normandy. The producers hired real soldiers as consultants. Each frame carried the ghost of the real invasion. Behind the scenes, the production nearly collapsed under its own ambition. Hundreds of extras were injured during the staged landings. Parachute jumps went wrong. Equipment failed. Some sequences were so close to reality that war offices demanded edits, fearing it exposed military tactics still in use. Critics called it too long, too massive, too impersonal, yet veterans called it frighteningly authentic. The paratrooper sequences, especially the drops into Sainte-Mère-Église, were described as eerily accurate by survivors. Its legacy still hangs heavy. Modern paratroopers watch it as a rite of passage. Every frame feels like a salute to those who never returned. In those slow, drifting parachutes, audiences saw not actors but ghosts suspended in light. Number 14. A Bridge Too Far, 1977. A Bridge Too Far dared to tell the story of failure. It was a film about Operation Market Garden, the ambitious Allied mission that turned into disaster. It was not glorified heroism. It was tragic precision. Each paratrooper in the film knew that history had already judged their mission as one bridge too far. The film's reputation was immense before shooting even began. Directed by Richard Attenborough, it gathered an army of stars. But what the cameras captured was pain, not victory. Thousands of extras and hundreds of veterans were used to recreate Arnhem. The realism became haunting. During production, one of the stunt parachutists nearly died when his chute failed to open. The crew kept shooting even as medics rushed in. There were rumors that British authorities tried to soften the defeat narrative. They wanted fewer shots of broken gliders and more of camaraderie. Attenborough refused. He said truth mattered more than pride. The controversy nearly shut the film down. When it premiered, some critics dismissed it as too bleak, but veterans stood and applauded. They said it was the first time Hollywood showed what it felt like to be dropped into chaos and watch every plan collapse. Today, A Bridge Too Far stands as both memorial and warning. Every generation of soldiers still whispers its title when strategy outruns reality. It reminds the world that even courage can be crushed by arrogance. Number 13. Go Tell the Spartans, 1978. Go Tell the Spartans was quiet, brutal, and forgotten far too soon. Set in the early days of Vietnam, it focused on American paratroopers sent into a meaningless battle before the war had officially begun. It was not propaganda. It was confession. The film came out during a time when Hollywood avoided Vietnam truths. Its title echoed ancient sacrifice, and that is exactly what the movie portrayed. Burt Lancaster played a weary officer watching idealistic young paratroopers march into slaughter. There were no heroic trumpet calls, only silence and jungle rot. Behind the scenes, the studio panicked. They feared the realism and pessimism would sink the film. Distributors tried to bury it under bigger war movies. The Pentagon refused cooperation. The jump scenes were shot with outdated gear and real veterans supervising to ensure every fall looked authentic. When it released, audiences were stunned. There were no medals, only ghosts. Critics later called it one of the most accurate Vietnam films ever made, even before Apocalypse Now or Platoon. It became a cult relic seen only in late-night television reruns until the 80s revival of anti-war cinema brought it back. Today it stands as a cinematic grave marker to those forgotten first drops into Southeast Asia. In its final scenes, as the paratroopers vanish into jungle smoke, you feel the message that every generation sends its sons to repeat the same mistake. And that truth was never fiction. Number 12. The Devil's Brigade, 1968. The Devil's Brigade marched into theaters as a rough-edge counterpoint to the Dirty Dozen. It told the true story of the 1st Special Service Force, a joint American and Canadian commando unit trained for high-risk parachute and mountain missions during World War II. Unlike many war epics, this one did not exaggerate. The real men it portrayed were alive to see themselves on screen. The film's reputation was mixed when released. Critics wanted another blockbuster, but veterans saw their own past reborn. William Holden played Colonel Frederick with cold precision, leading his ragtag men through brutal training and impossible odds in Italy. The movie captured the birth of modern special forces, showing paratroopers leaping into hell rather than glory. Behind the scenes, tensions ran high. American and Canadian military advisors fought over accuracy. Some governments objected to scenes of brutality, claiming they revealed classified techniques. The jump scenes were filmed with real airborne veterans who insisted every movement and command matched the truth. The production endured countless injuries and near deaths. During one mountain sequence, a stuntman's parachute snagged on a cliff, leaving him dangling for hours. Crew members refused to cut the shot, claiming it was too authentic to waste. The Devil's Brigade didn't make the money studios hoped for, but its reputation grew in barracks and training camps. It became a cult legend among paratroopers who recognized their lineage in those mud-caked faces. Its legacy remains the cinematic blueprint of brotherhood born from pain. Number 11. Saints and Soldiers, 2003. Saints and Soldiers was made on a shoestring, yet it landed like a spiritual explosion. Inspired by the true story of the Malmedy massacre during the Battle of the Bulge, it followed a small group of Allied paratroopers trapped behind enemy lines after escaping a mass execution. It was not a spectacle. It was a meditation on faith under fire. At the time of its release, war movies had gone digital and loud. This one was quiet, shot in cold Utah forests that doubled as Belgium. Every breath of frost on screen was real. The actors endured sub-zero temperatures to recreate the terror of survival. The controversy came when it was banned from several European festivals for being too sympathetic to religion. Censors argued that its title blurred the line between faith and warfare. The director refused to cut a frame, saying the real men he based it on fought not for politics, but for humanity. The paratrooper details were so exact that modern military instructors used it for training in survival tactics. The filmmakers even used period-correct parachutes and weapons supplied by collectors. It went on to win awards across independent circuits and gained a quiet cult following among veterans who said it captured the unspoken side of war, the endurance of spirit. To this day, Saints and Soldiers stands as proof that truth does not need budget or explosions, only honesty and frostbitten courage. Number 10. The Sea Shall Not Have Them, 1954. The Sea Shall Not Have Them wasn't a standard war drama. It was a tribute to the airborne rescue crews whose missions were as dangerous as combat itself. Based on real accounts from World War II, the film followed British paratrooper-trained air-sea rescue teams who jumped into freezing waters to save downed pilots. These operations were so perilous that many rescuers never returned. The film's emotional backbone came from its realism. Crews worked closely with actual RAF veterans who had performed mid-air parachute rescues. They taught actors how to brace in the aircraft door, how to hit the water without breaking limbs, and how survival depended on calm breathing rather than brute strength. Several scenes were shot in brutal winter seas where the cold numbed the actors so completely that medics had to put them under heat lamps between takes. The production faced resistance. Some government officials argued the missions were still classified and that revealing the failure rates, how many paratroopers disappeared into waves, would tarnish wartime morale. The director refused to cut the truth. He said the film was not about triumph, but duty. When released, critics were surprised by how quiet the movie was. No explosions, no assault landings, just men descending into the ocean to retrieve strangers. Veterans, however, embraced it, saying it captured courage of a different kind, courage without an audience. Today it stands as one of the rare depictions of paratroopers who fought gravity, sea, and time rather than enemy fire. A reminder that some battles happen between sky and water, unseen and uncelebrated. Number 9. The Red Beret, 1953. The Red Beret dropped into cinemas with the force of a salute and the shadow of secrecy. It was one of the first major films to depict the British Parachute Regiment after World War II, based loosely on real missions, but sanitized for audiences still grieving the cost of war. Directed by Terence Young, who would later helm the early James Bond films, it starred Alan Ladd as an American volunteer fighting alongside British paratroopers in North Africa. The story followed his transformation from outsider to hero amid missions drawn from actual regimental records. What audiences did not know was that several sequences mirrored classified operations. British officials quietly requested changes to the script, removing details of specific airborne tactics. The Ministry of Defense even reviewed early cuts, fearing they gave away training procedures still in use. Behind the scenes, the movie was made on restricted RAF bases using real military equipment. Many extras were serving paratroopers who performed their own jumps. During one take, a wind shear almost caused a fatal accident. Ladd himself narrowly escaped injury when a prop explosion went wrong. The film was a box office hit in Britain, but drew controversy in the United States for downplaying American involvement. Some critics accused it of British propaganda, yet veterans loved it for one reason: it felt real. The camaraderie, the exhaustion, the terror of waiting for the green light before the jump. Today, the Red Beret stands as both tribute and time capsule. It marks the dawn of cinematic airborne realism, when the truth was too fresh to be fiction and too painful to forget. Number 8. Battleground, 1949. Battleground was the film that soldiers called the closest thing to being there. It told the story of the 101st Airborne Division trapped at Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. It was not made with glamour or propaganda in mind. It was made by men who had just come home and still woke screaming from the memories. MGM executives doubted it would work. They wanted heroism, not hunger. But director William Wellman, himself a World War I veteran, demanded authenticity. He hired real paratroopers as technical advisors and filled the script with details only survivors would know. Frostbite, fog, starvation, and silence became the film's language. Behind the scenes, production was brutal. The actors filmed in freezing conditions while ice machines blasted them for hours. James Whitmore and Van Johnson lost weight during shooting to appear emaciated. The studio begged Wellman to add more warmth, more hope. He refused. He said this was not about glory, but endurance. When it released, the reaction was electric. Veterans sat in stunned silence in theaters. Many wept. The Pentagon praised it as the most honest depiction of combat ever filmed. Some European countries, however, temporarily banned it, claiming it reopened wounds too soon after the war. Battleground went on to win 2 Academy Awards and became required viewing in airborne training schools for decades. Even today, instructors use its scenes to explain how morale survives when everything else freezes. It remains one of the earliest war films that dared to be human instead of heroic. A rare moment when Hollywood bowed to truth rather than spectacle. Number 7. Pathfinders, In the Company of Strangers, 2011. Pathfinders, In the Company of Strangers uncovered a chapter of airborne history that mainstream war films had ignored for decades. It followed the real Pathfinder paratroopers of World War II, the men who jumped hours before the main invasion forces, landing alone in enemy territory to set up signal beacons that guided thousands of incoming aircraft. Their mission was silent, invisible, and often fatal. Many were never credited for what they accomplished. The filmmakers built the story from declassified after-action reports, combat journals, and interviews with aging veterans who had carried these memories for a lifetime. Every jump sequence used authentic World War II-style static line procedures supervised by modern airborne instructors. Cast members trained at night, running through forests with full packs, tripping on roots and crashing through brush exactly as the real Pathfinders had described. Production was dangerous. A stunt performer cracked a rib during a hard parachute opening. A flare-lit night scene nearly sparked a forest fire. Yet the filmmakers kept much of the raw footage because its roughness matched the chaos those men endured. Critics dismissed the film as unpolished, but veterans saw the truth inside the imperfections. They said it captured the loneliness, fear, and silent courage of being the first out the door. Pathfinders remains a tribute to soldiers whose job was simple and terrifying. Light the way, even if no one knows you did. Number 6. Band of Brothers, 2001. Band of Brothers was not just a television series, it was an awakening. Based on the true story of Easy Company of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, it followed. Ordinary men transformed into legends. From their first jump into Normandy to the fall of Hitler's Germany, every frame came from eyewitness accounts. It was truth given the rhythm of cinema. The production was monumental. Real paratroopers were consulted. Surviving veterans stood on set correcting dialogue and movements. The cast trained for weeks in mud and freezing rain to understand what those men endured. There were no special effects to fake exhaustion. Every bruise, every breath came from real effort. Controversy surrounded its release. Some critics said it glorified American triumph, while others accused it of focusing too heavily on trauma. The truth was simpler. It showed what war did to men's souls. It revealed courage, fear, and guilt without filters. Behind-the-camera producer Steven Spielberg demanded authenticity down to the smallest detail. Uniforms were hand-sewn. Each weapon was functional. The actors jumped from real planes to understand the chaos of airborne assault. The emotional weight was so strong that several cast members broke down after filming the liberation of concentration camps. The legacy of Band of Brothers is unmatched. Military academies use it as emotional training. Veterans call it sacred. It reminds viewers that paratroopers were not superheroes. They were human beings who fell through darkness into history. It remains a masterwork of memory and truth. Number 5. The Great Raid, 2005. The Great Raid told a story long buried under silence. It was based on the true rescue of American prisoners of war in the Philippines during World War II by paratroopers and rangers. The mission was one of the most daring behind enemy lines operations ever attempted. The film brought it back to light with unflinching realism. The production faced endless hurdles. Historical consultants insisted every shot matched the records. The parachute jump sequences were done using real World War II aircraft and period-accurate gear. The actors underwent military boot camp to feel the exhaustion and fear of night drops. When it premiered, some audiences expected high action. Instead, they got slow-burning tension. The studio panicked and limited the release, calling it too grim for summer crowds. Yet veterans praised it for showing restraint and accuracy. Behind the scenes, the director clashed with studio executives who wanted more explosions and less history. He refused to alter the mission timeline. Some governments objected to its portrayal of wartime atrocities and banned it from distribution. Over time, the movie became a quiet monument to the forgotten paratroopers of the Pacific. The Great Raid's message was not about victory but sacrifice. It told the truth that courage sometimes means crawling through mud while carrying hope for those still alive. Its closing scene, where survivors meet their rescuers under a dawn sky, stands among the most powerful moments in war cinema. It reminds viewers that freedom often lands, softly carried by parachutes. Number 4. The Eagles Are Coming, 1976. The Eagles Are Coming, also known internationally as The Eagle Has Landed, blended fiction with real history so seamlessly that many believed it actually happened. The film followed German paratroopers sent on a secret mission to capture Winston Churchill during World War II. It was inspired by rumors of real operations discussed by Allied intelligence. At its release, it was both a success and a scandal. Some politicians called it disrespectful for showing German soldiers as complex humans. British officials demanded disclaimers clarifying that no such mission occurred. Still, audiences could not shake the feeling that somewhere in history a similar plan had been whispered. Behind the scenes, the production was as daring as its plot. Director John Sturges used real paratrooper veterans for the jump scenes and insisted on practical stunts. One actor fractured a rib when landing on uneven ground. The cast performed their own airborne drills to create the authentic tension of a mission doomed from the start. The movie's realistic tone caused confusion among viewers. Some believed it was based on declassified documents. Others thought it revealed truths hidden by wartime censorship. The controversy only amplified its legacy. The Eagles Are Coming remains one of the most compelling portrayals of airborne warfare ever filmed. It explored loyalty duty and moral gray zones where soldiers on both sides fought not for ideology but for survival. Its closing moments where parachutes drift over a misty English village feel like history itself, breathing through fiction. Number 3. The Dirty Dozen, 1967. The Dirty Dozen was chaos turned into legend. Inspired by fragments of truth, it followed a secret group of condemned soldiers trained as paratroopers for a suicide mission behind enemy lines. Officially, it was fiction, but veterans recognized its echoes of real wartime experiments where criminals were offered redemption through impossible missions. The movie's reputation exploded on release. It was gritty, loud, and unapologetic. Yet buried under the entertainment was a reflection of genuine military programs the public was never supposed to know. Rumors spread that a classified Allied unit had once attempted something similar deep in occupied France. The government never confirmed it. Behind the camera, the production was as wild as the story. Director Robert Aldrich pushed the cast to exhaustion, using live explosives for realism. The jump training scenes used actual airborne instructors who punished the actors like recruits. Lee Marvin himself, a Marine veteran, led by example, demanding no stuntman for the jump sequences. Censors objected to its violence, calling it too raw for audiences. Some countries briefly banned it for glorifying disobedience. Yet soldiers loved it. They said it captured the madness of men who had nothing left to lose. Over decades, The Dirty Dozen became myth and memory blended together. Military historians still debate which real operations inspired it. To paratroopers, the truth matters less than the spirit it captured, brotherhood among the damned and courage born from chaos. It remains a symbol of how desperation sometimes writes the bravest stories. Number 2. When Trumpets Fade, 1998. When Trumpets Fade slipped quietly into television screens, but those who saw it never forgot. Set during the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest, it told the story of paratroopers trapped in one of the bloodiest forgotten campaigns of World War II. The story was fictional, yet built from hundreds of real testimonies that official histories ignored. The film's tone was merciless. Mud exhaustion and hopeless command decisions consumed every frame. HBO hesitated to release it, fearing viewers would reject such a bleak portrayal. There were no speeches of glory, no sweeping scores, just terror and exhaustion. Behind the scenes, the production crew recreated actual conditions of the battle. Actors lived in constant rain and cold during filming. The parachute training sequences were directed by retired airborne sergeants who enforced discipline as if it were real deployment. The crew captured the raw confusion of men lost in a war that refused to end. Critics called it one of the most honest war films ever made. Some veterans wrote letters thanking the filmmakers for showing what command never admitted. That bravery sometimes looks like simple survival. When Trumpets Fade never received theatrical glory, but among soldiers it became sacred. It told the truth that courage is not medals or music, but standing up one more time after every hope is gone. It is a masterpiece of quiet despair that refuses to fade. Number 1. The Great Escape, 1963. The Great Escape soared beyond cinema into myth. It told the story of Allied airmen and paratroopers who tunneled out of a German prison camp in one of the most daring escapes of the war. It was based entirely on fact, though the details were softened for audiences. Every tunnel, every coded message, every act of defiance came from real reports later declassified. The film was a phenomenon. Audiences cheered for Steve McQueen racing across fields on a stolen motorcycle, but behind that thrill lay a darker truth. Many of the real escapees were recaptured and executed by the Gestapo. The movie could not show that pain in full. During production, McQueen demanded to perform his own stunts. The motorcycle chase nearly killed him when he misjudged a jump and crashed through a fence. The crew kept filming. It became one of the most iconic moments in movie history. German veterans objected to the film's portrayal of their guards, calling it exaggerated, but survivors of Stalag Luft III confirmed its emotional accuracy. The escape scenes were shot using actual blueprints of the camp reconstructed plank by plank. The Great Escape remains more than entertainment. It is ritual viewing for airborne soldiers around the world, a reminder that courage is not just fighting, but escaping captivity with dignity. The final shot of McQueen bouncing his ball in solitary confinement echoes forever as the sound of defiance. Paratrooper movies are not just entertainment. They are memory dressed in light. Each jump on screen echoes the real heartbeat of men who fell through darkness for something greater than themselves. Some stories were buried, some were myths, but all remind us that history does not fade. It falls. Like, share, and comment to keep these legends alive.